I'm thankful that you took time today to pull up a seat. I hope these few minutes together help you follow Jesus better by deepening your relationship with Him and helping you live intentionally for Him every day. Hey, I pray that you're doing well. This is the last episode in the Spiritual Discipline series. I pray this series has helped all of us grow closer to Jesus and living intentionally for the kingdom. Before we jump into today's episode, let's quickly review the spiritual disciplines. A spiritual discipline is something we do to put ourselves in the position to deepen our connection with Jesus so that He can change us. Although there are many disciplines, we limited our talk to the following: Bible reading and journaling, prayer, community, silence and solitude, and worship. In this episode, we look at the discipline of Sabbath. This discipline really impacts our weekly rhythm. To help us think about the Sabbath, think back to that tough semester in college or some major project in your career. You busted your tail to get it done, spent late nights, hard work, high stress, nose to the grind. Then finals are over. The project is finally turned into your boss. Remember the relief that you felt when you finished that last final? Remember the feeling when you handed the completed project over to your boss or your client. Relief. Rest. We take a nap. This is what we experience each week when we practice the rhythm of Sabbath. We work hard all week. We accomplish, we create, we honor God with our work. Then we rest. I hope this conversation about Sabbath will help us begin to work this discipline into our weekly schedule. So let's get a working definition of Sabbath. A day set apart each week to rest from work so we can reconnect with God. As we will see, this concept of Sabbath is more than ceasing to work and reconnecting to God. Sabbath also carries a celebration aspect and a trust element. We celebrate all that God has done for us, and we trust that He is sovereign. Let's briefly look at just the history of Sabbath. The Old Testament and the New Testament both describe the Sabbath. We see it as early as the creation narrative. For 6 days, God created the universe: stars, suns, moons, planets, land, sea, plants, animals, lions, tigers, and bears, giraffes, elephants, humans. Then He rested. One thing that stands out to me is that God created man on the 6th day. So man's first full day of existence was the 7th day, the day of rest. God established boundaries for man. He established the priority of the Sabbath as part of the natural rhythm of life. In Exodus 16, we see the practice of Sabbath before God gives us the 10 Commandments. The people of Israel were complaining about not having enough food. So God sent bread from heaven. They were to collect enough bread for each day. But on the 6th day, they were to collect enough bread for the 6th day and the 7th. They rested from the mundane task on the 7th day and deepened their trust in God. The Sabbath mattered to God and Israel even before the 10 Commandments. We see in Exodus and in Deuteronomy that God's people are to remember and observe the Sabbath. It was one of the practices that set apart God's people from the rest of culture, from the rest of the world. I wish I had more time to dig here, but I know some of you are like, Jeff, that is part of the law. We are free from the law. We aren't legalistic. So let's look at what Jesus has to say about the Sabbath. From the life and ministry of Jesus, we learn about the discipline of the Sabbath. In Mark chapter 2, we see Jesus and the religious leaders discussing the Sabbath. We learn 2 key things about practicing the Sabbath. First, the Sabbath was made for man. The Sabbath is a gift from God for the good of man. How many times did Jesus get in trouble for healing on the Sabbath? Practicing the Sabbath correctly makes life better. The Sabbath should be life-giving. We also see in the passage that Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. He is the authority. The religion of the Pharisees is not the authority. They do not determine the practice of the Sabbath. Jesus is the authority. He is Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus determines how the Sabbath should be practiced. Then the early church, they practiced the Sabbath as a day of worship, rest, and prayer. We need to figure out what keeps us from practicing the Sabbath. We need to figure out the benefits of the Sabbath, and we need to figure out how to make the Sabbath part of our weekly rhythm. Here are some obstacles to us practicing the Sabbath. Legalism. We don't want to be legalistic, so we don't do anything. Some don't Sabbath because they have made work an idol. Productivity is their God. Some don't Sabbath because they don't need to. They've made rest an idol, and they're so lazy. So they don't need to Sabbath. Another reason we don't practice the Sabbath is because we haven't seen the Sabbath modeled. We've been encouraged to be productive and be hard workers. We have filled our calendars, even our church calendars, with busyness. Church culture makes it impossible to practice the Sabbath because it's driven by programs and events. We don't even realize that we are in the rat race. We don't see the importance of Sabbath. So what are some of the benefits of practicing the Sabbath? Through the regular practice of the Sabbath, we connect to God. When we intentionally Sabbath, we slow down. We refocus on God. We get to know who He is. We experience His characteristics. We remember and celebrate the person and work of Jesus Christ. Working the Sabbath into our calendar, it frees us from the grind. We don't realize the weight of the grind. We don't even realize we're in the grind. When the quarantine happened, I came to the realization that I was close to being burnt out. I had neglected Sabbath and was consumed with work. The quarantine revealed that I was making an idol of my job. Not working my normal routine and getting in the grind stripped away all of my identity and satisfaction. I was burnt out. The quarantine forced me out of my schedule and out of the grind. I rested. I focused on reconnecting to God. My time in the Word was not a chore. It was a pleasure because I wasn't driven by the clock and work. Practicing the Sabbath recharges us for life and work. When we step away from our work and we rest, it renews our body and our minds. So we will be more productive at work. We'll be better workers. We'll be more creative because we practice the Sabbath. As we Sabbath, we manage our time instead of our time managing us. We have to make choices of what we put on the calendar. If you start with your relationship with God and practicing the Sabbath, you will be a better steward of your time. Those who practice the Sabbath will see their stress level decrease. When you Sabbath, you realize what is important. You see what needs to be on your brain, so your stress goes down. I think we need to figure out how to practice the Sabbath. Each of us need to think about how we can use the day to help us rest and reconnect with God. Some of that will depend on your job. If you have a very physically demanding job, you need to truly rest your body. If your job is more mental work than others, you might need to get your body moving and rest your brain. If your job is super social, maybe you need to withdraw from relationships for the day. There's a lot of freedom in how we practice the Sabbath. So how do we practice the Sabbath? First off, remember that freedom, but also remember the purpose of the Sabbath and that it is a gift. Trust God with that day. Get a plan. Prepare for the day, then rest on that day. In conclusion, you might be saying, Jeff, you just don't understand all that I've got to get done. I might counter that by saying, if we can't take 24 hours to rest and focus on God, then we take ourselves way too seriously. We've made ourselves God and have made idols out of our work and our calendar. So I want to encourage you, set aside a day this week and the weeks to come so that you can rest and reconnect with God. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode of Pull Up a Seat. If you've not yet subscribed, do that now so you can get content as soon as it comes out. Also, please help us get the word out by sharing on social media and inviting others to pull up a seat. Until next time, grow in your relationship with Jesus and find one way to live intentionally for Him. See you next time when we pull up a seat.